Francesca from Peluka Salon, and welcome to episode 2 of Peluka Presents. So what we're going to do is take you through measuring your hair for a topper, which is quite tricky if you're doing it yourself. And obviously, if you're able to go into a salon, they will do that for you. But I think it's really important that you are able to understand the process and also explore the different areas of hair loss, and the stages of hair loss, so that you understand your own hair loss as best as possible. Because armed with that knowledge, when you do visit a salon or you do start to research and look for toppers, you feel a bit more in control of what it is you're looking for, because there's a huge range of topper base sizes, base materials, and it can be really overwhelming. I'm super happy to have Georgie here with me today from At Her Hair My Head, and she's going to be my assistant, and we are going to go through measuring her base size and talk about also the experiences that she's had with different bases and the process that she's gone through to arrive at her own understanding of her hair loss. It's important to mention that when you are dealing with hair loss that is sometimes cyclical, can come back, and it changes, that you measure your head at regular intervals. We often have clients who buy the same things over and over again without really paying attention to how the hair loss is progressing or improving as well. So that's a really important point, that keep an eye on it yourself, because sometimes you feel like things are changing but you don't know why, and things aren't fitting in the same way. So it's really important. So Georgie, a little intro about maybe what you've done in the past and how your experience of how you found your own size and toppers before we go through the actual process.
Hello, thank you. So when I bought my first topper, the company that I bought it from, they just had one base size, and I knew so little about it. I just ordered. I didn't measure my head. I didn't know that I had to do that. I literally just ordered this topper, and I think it was about a 5x6. So kind of quite average coverage, and that worked quite well for me. So any subsequent toppers that I bought were similar kind of size. And then after I had my last baby, so that was 8 months ago, and my hair thinned a lot more, I started to think, oh, actually, I probably do need a bit more coverage. And I started to kind of learn a bit more about bigger base toppers. So in the last few months, I've had a lot more larger base toppers, which have different challenges and they have pros and cons. So I have got quite a range now of, I've got quite a few toppers that are sort of a 5x6, or I've got a 7x8, and then I've recently been sent a 9x9, which is the biggest that I've got. And I do also have one 4x4, which is tiny, which actually it doesn't clip. It only clips into my thin areas, but it's so small and light that it's not a huge problem. So I've got quite a range of base sizes now.
And I think that's also important to have a few different options as time goes on, because it does two things. It allows you to quickly have to hand something that fits better if things change, but also by switching things up, you are putting less stress, especially if you're using clips, you're putting less stress on the same areas of your hair, and we will come back to that. So the first thing I want to talk about before we do the measuring is just have a look at yourself. So I'm going to kind of look at Georgie's hair loss and try and understand where that hair loss is, because it's not just about a base size, it's also the area of hair loss, because toppers have different shapes, and it's like a puzzle. We have to find the right kind of shape to fit the area of hair loss. So I will look at Georgie's hair. So I would, if she were with me, but in an online scenario, I would ask her to put her head forward. Georgie, put your head forward. And so that I can see, she's really good. She's parted it so I can really see what's happening. And we have quite, what I would say, a progressive hair loss that's all in the same kind of area, so it's diffuse. It's not necessarily just located at the front or at the back. So that would be my initial assessment. I'd obviously get her to turn around, and I would, if she were with me, I would kind of pull the hair around. Yeah, can you turn around there?
I might have to kneel. Hold on a sec. Turn it in the right position.
That's it. Now you see why that's really important, because I can see that there is it's graduating a little bit down as well. So you can see, and actually the light in this scenario is really good because it's really highlighting where I can see the scalp. So that would be my first assessment. So I would say to anyone, get someone else to look, or look yourself, take pictures so you can have a really good look. Thank you, Georgie. You may turn back around.
Thank you.
So this is a really good chart. People can access this on my website, on other people's website. These are no secrets, but these little charts just give you an idea, because lots of toppers are given like they're for the beginning stages, the middle, progressive stages, and advanced stages. So they really do tell you that in the beginning we are looking at, it says it really nicely here. Kind of sometimes it just tends to be at the part line, and it's just very limited to the part line, and it kind of grows. It grows outwards and also gets thinner. So you might feel like you're sitting in between, but that's why we measure and we look at where it is. The other thing I would then look at is, where is that hair loss? So for Georgie, I would put her in right now it's throughout. It may have started like this for Georgie. It may have started like this in the front or just in the crown. Everyone is different. So that's really important that you know where it is. I had a client the other day who was just in the front. It was about here, but it was just in the front. So the diagnosis, as it were, or the recommendation would be very different if it were in the crown and here. So we really have to have a think about that, and it's important if you can do that for yourself as well, because then you can understand and have a really good conversation with your hair specialist. So Georgie, did you have access to anything like that? How did you assess your own hair loss in terms of how it progressed, or how much you were dealing with?
No, so initially I had no sort of, aside from going to visit my GP who diagnosed me with androgenetic alopecia, there was no kind of advice like that. Mine started here, so it's always been really, really thin here, and then the parting, but where I had the kind of second lot of hair loss after having my baby, I think I was a lot more knowledgeable by that point, because I'd been a part of the Instagram community for a while, and so I'd learned quite a lot. So now I feel like I understand a lot more what I need, but yeah, initially I was completely in the dark. It was just like all my hair's thinning, and it wasn't so much at the back, but obviously again recently it's become much thinner at the back, and when I wear my 4x4 topper, which literally sits here, there isn't enough coverage at the back.
Yeah, that back, yeah, it doesn't overhang enough. It's interesting because I do work with a lot of clients where it's very sparse, like yourself, across that front, and that is can be problematic with toppers, because in an ideal topper world you use as much of your bio hair as possible to blend, and those that have enough around the front are in a position where they've got more choice, because that your topper can sit a bit back and you can really use that to blend. But when you haven't, you are relying on bases that either have lace fronts and sit flat, or as flat as possible bases. And I'm sure that's something that you are finding a bit of a challenge, or have found a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I cut fringes into a lot of my toppers, because unless you have a really good front, then a fringe covers up, it solves that problem.
Yeah, exactly. So if you don't have the lace front, then it doesn't mean that you can't have the other toppers. It means that you have to consider how you would conceal that edge. And wig wearing, topper wearing, it's all about the custom treatments that you give your piece afterwards. And I find that toppers, if you're on your own and you're trying to so there's a statistic, you know, that in terms of buying online, toppers get returned more than wigs get returned, because toppers are much more of a challenge when you're by yourself, because you've got to figure out how to pop it on and have it sit where you want it to sit. Then you've got to figure out that whether or not your colour is blending correctly, and then you've got to figure out blending it to your hair style and length. So I would always recommend that for someone to have, even if it's an online consultation, to have that, so that all those stages are advised upon, rather than buying online and then getting a little bit, because I think, Georgie, I think you've said before, haven't you, that you often see toppers being returned because of those reasons.
All the time. I think it's really hard, and it's even things like the texture of the hair. So this hair, it kind of looks like I've got a fair amount of hair here, but this hair is very, very fine. And sorry, I've got like a bit of a cross on my face at the moment.
I know, you're it's fine, don't worry.
Yeah, so my bio hair is very, very fine and fairly straight. So if you have a topper that's a different texture of hair, the two can look quite different. And it is a lot more tricky to blend them. And yeah, I see loads of people selling toppers because the colour's wrong or the length is wrong, and it's just a bit more of a challenge. And that's why I think the customization route is really important, because really what you want is to take your topper to someone and they will cut it with your bio hair, so almost on your head, and then it makes it one, if that makes sense.
I think whilst we're on that subject, you know, if somebody is looking to buy a topper, they should always take the advice of the cut, you know, so come to a salon. So if you're coming to me, you don't have to be buying the topper from me, but I would much rather someone contact me and say, I'm thinking of buying this with a view to you customizing it for me. Am I buying the right color? Am I buying this? And quite often I might say, no, buy a lighter color, because we can do much more with a custom color from a lighter base than trying to lift, because the majority of our custom requests are balayage highlights. And I often think, if only you had contacted me first, I would have said, no, buy the shade 6, because we'll get a beautiful result from that, for example. So I think, don't be afraid to speak to a salon about a custom project before you've bought the piece, even if you're not buying it from us. So it's really planning. So planning is really important with toppers. Okay, so on to measuring. So we take the measurements in inches, but it doesn't matter. You just need to make sure, if you're sending measurements over to someone, that you specify, you know, whether it's centimeters or inches, but it tends to be inches, and that's what you'll see with the base sizes. So have you got your tape measure hand?
Yeah, it had disappeared. It's white. It blended in with the colour.
So what we tend to do, we talk to the client, and I can't have a feel of Georgie's hair, but I can direct her to do that. And we have to consider how that topper is going to be applied to the head. We'll talk about clips in the main, because that tends to be the main way that you apply clips. But there's also tape, like more semi-permanent bonding. But what we're going to do, we're going to measure for clips, and then I'll talk about the differences. So what I would do is I would need Georgie to have a feel of her own hair and think about where the clips would go. So I want her to find the strongest healthy hair. What I don't want is for her to have to clip into the weaker, finer hair, for 2 reasons. It's weak and it will break, but the clips are going to rub onto the scalp and cause irritation, sores. You really have to look after your scalp and your existing hair. So Georgie will have a little think and look, maybe clip it out the way, or just have a think about where she would feel comfortable clipping something in. I'm not asking her to tug her hair, you know, you don't have to do a tug test or anything, but you know where it feels comfortable.
So it's, I mean, it's probably around here.
Yeah.
And then slightly lower at the back.
Yeah, bear in mind, we tend to do a bit of a back comb on the areas that we clip in, because it's easier to do. So think about whether or not that area would be enough to kind of back comb a bit up as well, because that's how the clips would easily fit. Then, so she's had a little look, and now I'm going to ask her to do just 2 measurements, front to back. So there's no healthy, we're not clipping in the front, but I need the hairline or where we would sit that topper back. Sometimes you'll sit the topper back if there was hair there about an inch, inch and a half. But for Georgie, we're going to go from a front hairline to the healthy hair at the back. So I'm going to write it down. So Georgie's front to back.
So it's 9 inches.
Right. And then the same again, we go at the centre. So not here yet. I might take some additional ones, but if you think about the centre of your head, I want that side to side to the healthy hair.
I think it's about here.
Yeah. The whole lot. Yeah.
That's about 4 inches, but actually, let me just do that again.
That looks the, but the whole, all the way across.
Oh, all the way across. From
yeah, so it'd probably be 8 if it's symmetrical, but yeah, all the way across.
Yeah, I'd say about 8.
So can you, so that is to healthy hair. Let's just, for the purposes of illustration, measure it to where you think it's just, you know, the minimum hair loss, because I think showing that difference is quite important. So if you were to have just done it from here to where your hair loss ends, you'll probably find that you've got an inch, maybe an inch and a half difference. And the reason I want that measurement is for something we'll talk about a little bit after.
That's about 6.
Right, okay. And then side to side, same again.
5.
That's a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's important that people do both of those measurements, because if you only do that the second measurement, the hair loss area, for example, your front to back was 9, and then you had 6 when it wasn't healthy hair. Now, whilst you might buy online and say, oh, I need something in a 6x5 or 6x6, what you're doing is you're buying a base that sits in the area of hair loss, but you're going to struggle putting it on, because you're going to be like pain and all of these things. So bear that in mind when you're looking, when you're measuring, that, you know, you don't necessarily, so for Georgie, you've got 9 by 8. That might feel big. You might think we've just been a bit ambitious, or we've been erred on the side of caution too much. So you can come back in maybe half an inch there if you see a base that's just a bit, but we know what we're working with. You know for a fact that 6x5, you're going to need a bit more. So minimum, I would say 8x7, for example, sort of size. So we've got some wiggle room there. So that's really, really important. The other thing that you need to think about when you're looking at the size is the shape. And that's the last thing I want to talk about, is just the shape. We're going to talk about different base sizes in our next episode, but the shape is really important. So I've got a really nice chart here. Actually, before I do that, how does that, because you say you've not measured your hair loss at all, your area, when you're looking at those numbers, does that come as a surprise, or is there anything that you would take away from taking those measurements in that way?
I would say that kind of tallies up with where I thought my hair loss was, in terms of how it's progressed recently and how I'm finding the larger toppers more comfortable, because I've still got some smaller bases, and I am finding that they're not as comfortable. So actually, yeah, that does it does make sense, because I do need more coverage. And definitely the bigger bases are more comfortable. And my only slight issue with the bigger bases, and I know you're going to come on to this in a sec, is they're a different shape. So my smaller ones are kind of slightly more elongate, you know, more of a rectangle, whereas the big ones are a circle. And the clips, on some of them, the clips want to clip here. And that, I find that very uncomfortable.
Mm. And that's it. So we have to consider all of these things, that's why when you're doing it by yourself, it's no wonder that people find that harder than wigs. So I'm just going to show you some different shapes, because so we are in, there is a code here, but like these are the beginning stages, but you can see how some of these are for the front, for the crown. This is just the parting. Then things start to get bigger with these different kind of shapes. That triangle goes at the front because the area of hair loss is here. Equally, they can be flipped around as well. And these bases just get bigger and bigger. Now, when we're talking about Georgie's, we're in here. If we were to follow that larger size, we're in, and that's what Georgie's saying, that the shape becomes rounder. Yeah. And that, can you see that in some of them you have clips here? They're the clips that Georgie's finding tricky, and then there's a clip here. But your salon or specialist should be able to move clips, should be able to think about alternative tweaks to make this bit work for you. Okay, but what you need to look at is, when we talked about this, the shape of your hair loss, I suppose, is a nice way to put it, to almost think about the shape of your topper as well. So really, if I were looking now, and this is a really good, these charts are really good because they show you how those different shapes sit. So what Georgie needs is probably something here. Now that's a bit smaller. That's a 6.5. Hang on one sec. 6.5 by 6.5, which by her smaller measurement would cover the area of hair loss, but only gives you 1/2 inch of clip-in area. So you would want to go a bit up, but that's the point that I'm making, is that this is not a decision to be made by yourself. You need to do this in consultation with someone. And actually, we're in a place now where we are able to access online support and have this conversation. If you come to a consultation armed with a bit of understanding already and some measurements, that consultation will be much more fruitful, as it were, than if you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, because you can say, I've got this is what I'm thinking, tell me I'm on the right track. Lots of places do it, but I have online, what have I called it? Online pre-order chat. So it's like a 1/2 hour. I think I've narrowed my choices down. Can you help me to make sure that those are the right choices? So ask for that. Say to them, I'm about to buy something off your website. I've got all this information. Tell me if I'm on the right track or what you would recommend. We want you to do that, especially if you can't get to us. So I think I've gone through everything, just so that the purpose of this episode is for you to understand that there are different sizes, the different stages of hair loss, and how to take some measurements. We've talked about clip-in methods, and that's why when you have a clip-in method, you measure that wider area. If your hair loss, for example, if you have hair loss where it's so surgery or alopecia that has halted but has left you with completely bald area, so there's no hair, you would be a candidate for different methods of applying it. So you could use tape, glue, and then possibly go on to bonding. That's where you can come down a little bit in size, because you're not clipping in, you're actually sticking, whichever method of sticking, you're sticking it to your head directly, so you don't need to clip it to hair. In fact, you need no hair for that glue, and some places will remove any existing hair. So if Georgie wanted to, which I'm not saying that that's what the route she wants to go down to, but she may get to a point where she thinks, I want to start gluing this down, or it's become so thin and so diffuse that the hairs that are left serving her no purpose, because she can't, because sometimes Georgie can scoop it up and do stuff and, you know, be okay around the house or whatever kind of process that she's going through. But there may be a time where she would think, no, let's just shave off this bit here and let's start bonding, or not even permanent, but not even bonding that needs you to come back every 2 weeks, but doing it yourself. So taping it down. So Georgie said to me earlier that this area she's finding difficult. She may get to a point where she says, I'm just going to shave that bit out because then I can stick it down and it doesn't bother me not having that there, and I'll maintain that removal of hair. So those conversations can be had, and those decisions are entirely the client's to make. But I always think I'll tell you that that's an option that you may not have considered, or that you think is parked there for a future consideration. Have you thought about that though, Georgie? Like the bonding,
No,
like the conversation that we
when
haven't
I
had.
first was looking into sort of topper options, I did go up to a company in London and speak about having like an integrated hair system. But actually, I like, because I'm quite sweaty, I like being able to take my hair off.
Yeah.
So it's never hugely appealed to me, because I think if it's stuck on and I get really hot, I'm going to be really sweaty and uncomfortable. But you're right. I mean, I might get to a point in the future where this is, I mean, you can see there's just a few little hairs here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not really something I've thought about before. I have thought there's quite a few women on Instagram who have a similar sort of hair loss to me, who have just buzz cut their head and then they wear wigs.
Yeah.
And I have often thought, because I don't obviously particularly like how I look with no hair on, and I've often thought, oh, maybe I would look better with a buzz cut, but I still love my toppers. I'm not at a point where I'm ready to go 100% to wig.
Yeah. And that's effectively the same sort of, approach. It's removing the hair that is not serving you a purpose. If it serves you a purpose, absolutely don't remove it. But if you think that this topper that I love, if I could just put some tape here, that might be all the difference. It might be a life-changing, and I'm not being dramatic when I say that. We talk about these things, they are important. So that might give you the security and make something work for you in such a way that losing a little patch here, for example, doesn't give you any kind of negative impact when you're not wearing the hair. So I'd always think about that. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add, Georgie, because I know that this is quite it's an in-depth process, measuring the head. And I think when you go to a salon, if they're not doing that, you need to question them. And I say, that's the first thing we talk about: lifestyle, then we talk about, and then we'll measure. And I'll take a measurement of a client regardless of whether they're just wanting a bit of advice, because I've got them on file. I know if they ever come back to me, I've got them. So if someone isn't measuring your head or asking you about the measurement, then really question that.
Well, there's a couple of things I was just thinking about when you said about bonding, that some people obviously have the type of alopecia where they get bald patches, not like this, as in, they might have really thick hair here and then they might have a patch. And so obviously for them, the clips might be a huge issue, because they might be able to clip on this side, but then they've got a bald patch. So is there the opportunity to sort of take away a clip and put in a bit they could stick down?
Yeah, I always say to someone, consider these clips as just a starting point, because I do often remove and completely move, because I'll look at the client's hair and I'll say, yes, we want an even distribution of clips in that topper, but these might move down because there's not enough hair, and then we might replace that with a bit of tape as well, double. We might move something up, or we might go bigger clips, smaller clips, combs. There's so many different ways, but everyone's, it's like clothes, I suppose. And we don't take in clothes. Maybe it's not a good example, but we shouldn't we? They don't fit properly. We should adjust them. We should have that, but that's what your specialist's for, to say, right, well, these clips aren't working for you. I'm going to switch these out. And I do a lot of that, but also you can take them away completely. And a lot of toppers, as they get bigger, when you take away the clip, as you've seen, there is a PU patch ready for tape. And tape is just, you can get different grades of tape that are stronger, that are weaker. I use tape just to hold something in place, but it comes off the evening easy. And that is a lovely way to start, because it gives you enough security, but you can still whip it off in the evening, you know, you're not, but there is tape that lasts 3-4 days a week, you know, so really you can build up and do that. So yeah, I think there's worth considering, if something's not, if it fits properly, you've got everything else right, but you can't get the clips or the, you know, how you apply it right, speak to someone who I'm fairly certain will be able to finagle those clips around and play with how they work. So anything else? I think we've covered loads in that. We're meant to do 10-minute sessions, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No, that's it. You've answered all my questions.
Fabulous. Right, well, thank you everyone for watching, and our next episode will talk through and show you some of those toppers and those base sizes, so wait for that.